I'm your host, Riem Zin Labidin, and you are listening to Tic Tac Podcast. Today, our guest is Kit Langton. He's a Scala developer and a teacher at Ziverge. In his free time, he contributes to open source software. He also sings and plays piano. Are you excited to meet Kit? Yeah, me too. I felt like Dora. Okay, so let's meet Kit and learn more about his journey.
Hello, Ian.
Hey Kit, welcome to Tic Tac. I think this is the first time I meet you in person. I know that it's online, but I'm glad to get the chance to talk to you today, and it's awesome to have you here. Thanks for being my guest.
Thank you. Well, yeah, it's so good to be here. I listened to a couple of the past episodes, and I really like your goal and mission, and you seem like a really super nice and smart person. So it'll be a pleasure chatting with you for the duration of this recorded session.
Thank you. So, to know you more, can you introduce yourself and tell us some fun facts about yourself?
Yeah, sure, of course. So hello, my name is Kit Langton, and I am currently a Scala developer. I work for a company called Ziverge, which starts with the letter Z, and also creates some software that starts with the letter Z, like Zio. And I do weekly Scala tutorial called Zymposium with another Z there, which is the worst SEO imaginable. Because it gets autocorrected to symposium every time. Even it doesn't even let you correct it. But anyway, I like to teach Scala and talk about functional programming in Scala and effect systems, and just share what I find interesting about this pretty, intellectually stimulating career that is software development. I like building apps and stuff. It gives whatever that God complex thing. You get to create a little application and make your own little perfect world. So I like doing that. Have a bunch of little side projects. Yeah, pretty much always coding or doing something else that I like to do. Oh, fun facts. Yes. So my fun facts are the other things when I'm not coding are probably just playing music. I like music a lot, and sometimes doodling. But I'm trying to cut out doodling. I'm trying to give it up and just focus on coding and music, and my beautiful, wonderful wife, whom I love, and friends and all that stuff. So it's hard to juggle. It's a busy time.
That's cool. How did you start to get passionate about programming? Was it related to your education path? Like how your journey has started?
The education path might have affected it, but only sort of in like the negative direction. I liked the computer a lot ever since I was a kid. It was satisfying, and I like poking around on it and exploring it. I always wanted to try programming. I remember going to like an early Mac world with my dad and seeing some like booth. I must have been 8 or something, with something like a piece of software called Code Warrior or something. I think it was for C++. Some kind of crazy language. It was not built for kids at all, but I really wanted to do it. And I think I tried to read a book on it, and I totally bounced off. I was too young and too scared of it. But I like computers a lot in school, and I always was mucking around in them or doing animation or breaking them or playing pranks on my tech teachers or something in some way, or helping them with their computers. But never really got into programming. Didn't think I was a programmer at all. Did increasingly poorly at school academically, actually. I was pretty swell in elementary school, kicked butt at simple times tables and so on and so forth, reading those books. But as the homework became a larger load, I became increasingly bored and reclusive, and didn't really like school at all. High school was just a terrible torture chamber in every way imaginable, and and I played a lot of music and just bummed around and barely got into a college for illustration, which I then dropped out of because I didn't go to class, which is something that they really want you to do. So it was a pretty bleak time academically, which is all to say that, yes, that had no bearing on programming. I just was sort of good at computers in the abstract, comfortable with poking around and exploring things. but not anything to do with programming. I just didn't think I could do that. And after bumbling around for a few more years, I finally made it to an illustration school I really wanted to get into, the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan. And I was 25, and this was kind of like the only dream I had besides playing music. And I got in, and I immediately realized I hated it. I was sort of working towards it for 5 or 6 years, and it really was terrible and very expensive. But luckily, during my internship that I had during that period, I had like a little tech gig doing some really terrible stuff for $10 an hour. I had to upload all of these files to some like business to business portal. That was just the worst designed website in the world. And I had to sort of upload one image at a time and click for each image through 10 different pages and check all these boxes, the same boxes every time, the same radio buttons and everything. Type in some text that was based on the image name or dimensions and whatever. And I knew enough about computers to know that that process was sort of both Sisyphean and torturous, and also totally fit the bounds of something that could be programmable. So I downloaded a piece of software called Keyboard Maestro. I didn't even let myself sort of go straight to programming. I needed to use a weird little Mac app called Keyboard Maestro that kind of let you automate clicks and run some very primitive JavaScript. So I like took screenshots of the UI and sort of automated all the clicks to do for each image. So I changed my job into basically being able to run this weird script with a folder of images, and it took like an hour and did everything I was doing manually. And I was so excited by that process. I told my boss, but he didn't understand and kept giving me the same exact amount of work. And so I invested my newfound free time into reading about programming on the internet, and I read about Ruby, and I decided to re-implement that thing in Ruby, and I eventually did, running it with like Selenium to control the web browser. I was still excited and told my boss, and he still did not care. And I was like, okay, I'm going to make my own version of this app with Ruby on Rails, and I started studying that at this internship, and I just kind of during that period of time when I wasn't in school, I was just learning during this internship and on my own, and slowly realizing I could probably do this, and got very obsessed with it to the point where I was supposed to draw naked people when I came home, or draw fruit or something, or anything to do with art school. But instead I just read Ruby books. I read like Sandy Metz's book on object-oriented Ruby programming, and was just eating it up. And and then I decided I should probably drop out of art school and do programming, because illustration pays nothing, and it's instead of subsidizing my latent programming hobby with illustration, I might as well flip that and subsidize doodling with programming. That seemed like a smarter decision. So I joined a boot camp, and it went really well. And that was kind of the beginning. Wow, I talked for a really long time. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. And when you started learning, is there some group of people were with you? And is there any inspiration or motivation around you, or just by yourself tried this?
Unfortunately, just by myself. I did have some parental support with my dad. Always knew what I was on. I was on the computer all the time, and so he's like, "You should do programming. Like that's a career path. Do programming. Stop playing music in the basement and doodling, and stop being a barista and try to be a programmer." But I didn't believe I could do that. So that was, I guess, that was good parental support. Now that I think about it, thank you, Dad. But besides that, none of my friends knew much about computers. I was always the most technically savvy, and no one was really interested by it at all. So no, it was just me and the internet. Mm-hmm. Luckily, the whole internet was there, so there were some good Ruby on Rails tutorials, and I think Michael Hartle that may have been my first experience. There was some guy named Michael Hartle with a Rails tutorial, and then Sandy Metz was very inspirational. Her talks were great. She's a great speaker. Probably for anyone. I mean, she tends to focus on object-oriented programming, which is, I've sort of moved away from that, but she's still a great speaker and has really good at presenting ideas. And Gary Bernhardt as well. I think he's probably the most inspirational person in terms of what I like to do with programming now. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
Oh, he's great. He has a website called Destroy All Software. Mm-hmm. Which is a series of just like videos that he records. They're just 10-minute, 15-minute videos that tend to have been focused on Ruby and Rails in the past. But he's like a master of Vim. He's so good at typing. He just live codes it. It's just basically like one unedited segment, which is amazing. If you've ever had to like record yourself, and I like whenever I do that, I make a million edits. It's just the timeline is just like every 5 seconds, a million edits.
Yeah, me too.
It's crazy looking, but it's just like it's like a one shot. In cinema, there's this thing called known as a oneer, one with an R at the end, where you just do like a long shot. You may have seen it in some movies, like Children of Men, if you've ever seen that, or the beginning of Boogie Nights, where they have this like really long signal shot where it's just like 5-10 minutes long, and it's just like, oh my god, there's how are horses running around and people are choreographed, how do they even shoot this? Like that's kind of the programmatic equivalent to Gary Bernhardt's Destroy All Software videos. They're like, my mouth is on the floor knowing how difficult it is to speak eloquently while typing and doing Vim stuff and not screwing up for 15 minutes. So that was cool, and I like trying to emulate him today. That's probably why I'm into Vim and typing, trying to type quickly and rambling and stuff. Anyway,
I remember whenever I watch your talks, I just got some very good energy from it. It's you can feel it.
Thank you. Oh yeah, maybe this is relevant in my past. I like to do improv a little bit. I did some improv as a kid. In high school, that was like my only like friend group. There was an improv club that I got into when I was a freshman. I was very excited about that. And so I think there's some aspect of that. I feel I do the best. I'm not a great planner. I'm not a very type A person, but I like working under sort of immediate pressure to attempt to perform in some way. And I don't think I'll ever be like virtuosic or a perfectionist, but I think I've learned to realize that I have my own particular kind of rambling chaos energy, which maybe is entertaining or potentially exhausting, depending on who you are. But I found some people who seem to enjoy it in the programming world, and I'm very grateful to find nice folks who don't hate me. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool, believe me. And your first job or part-time job in programming, how was it? How did you get your very first official job?
Yeah, so I did a boot camp, and because I was into programming, and I just was too afraid to just apply to a job. Very frightening without a CV at all or any relevant experience, just like being a barista and a server and a cashier. And yes, I did not have very compelling jobs. I didn't graduate from college, as I mentioned. I dropped out a couple times, which is impressive. How many times I dropped out of different like community colleges and whatnot, but nothing that I felt safe going into the battle of an interview with. So I decided to do a boot camp, because then I'd figure out, where do I stand? Where am I good at this at all? Because I didn't know anyone else who did it. So I assumed everyone else is kind of a super genius at programming. And so I applied to a boot camp, and I got in. I was very excited. It was online only, and it was free. There was like a deposit, but you got that back if you didn't make it through. So it was just kind of a no-brainer. You had to pay it back after you got a job. It was one of these sort of like delayed payment plans, which I should specify. I think the bootcamp market has changed. My wife recently did one of sort of a similar variety, but they changed the terms of these sorts of contracts, where now it feels like a scam. And I feel like I got very lucky kind of getting in early at this time, where this bootcamp was small and it wasn't a scam. Like the CEO was actually cared and gave people their money back if they screwed up. It was called Viking Code School. It's for Ruby on Rails. It's really cool. Shout out to Eric Troutman, the old CEO of that. But what else? What am I even saying? So I went there, and it was amazing. And I realized actually pretty quickly that I'd studied a lot on my free time, doing that sort of internship and all being obsessed with it for about, I guess, 6 months to a year before that I'd come in with a pretty sizable amount of knowledge, and was able to do really well and help my fellow students, and sort of I realized, because it was kind of a pair-based system where you paired with another student every day, a different random student, and you went through the material, kind of project-based. So I found myself helping my other students, my co-students, a lot, and really enjoying that. And I think the guy who ran it, Eric, noticed that I was both doing really well and teaching other people. And so about halfway through the course, he offered me to join. I think that's a common thing with these boot camps. It's kind of a pyramid scheme, actually. But this is a positive pyramid scheme where they hire from within at that point. So I was like, okay, I'm either going to take this job and maybe get paid like a bit less than I would be able to if I actually got a programming job at a big company, but I'm afraid of interviews, and I'm gonna get, I know these people and I like them, and I'm gonna get to learn more and figure out what I like. And so I accepted their offer and taught there for about a year and a half. So that was my first job. It was like kind of a cheat code. I did not have to do the scary thing of going into job interviews until a little later when I had to in the normal course of events. But yeah.
And during that time, do you remember like what were the challenges that you went through, or your learning experience from it that you developed?
Yeah, from the boot camp in particular.
Yeah.
I mean, I learned a lot about a lot of things. It was a really cool experience, especially because, as I mentioned, I was never very good academically. I think the pace and the assignments and the structure of it really just bored me to death, and I just rejected it and did what I wanted. Generally, occasionally an assignment would come up where I'd sort of interpret it in a semi-creative way and write like a really long essay that didn't quite do what the teacher wanted. And some teachers like that, but it drove most of them insane. So this boot camp actually ended up being really good for my brain and learning style, where I could very obsessively plunge into a single topic that I already found interesting. And it was really intense, and I could sort of become monomaniacally focused on this one thing. And I guess it was a little competitive too. And I don't think of myself as a competitive person necessarily, but it had all the right ingredients to, like, I wanted to impress my teachers and impress my fellow students and help them. And I was kind of a machine during that 4-month period. It's basically all I did from morning till night. I moved back in with my parents and just did that to become hireable. And so, I mean, I learned a lot. It was project-based, so it kind of, I think what I learned the most was that I learned that I could learn. And I think that's a really important thing, that you can learn on your own, and that there is that confusion is okay. And confusion is kind of the first part of the learning process. Without confusion, I think some people tend to run from feeling confused. They get scared and they feel like, I don't know this, therefore I can't know it. But truly, that's the signal that your brain is telling you that it is actually grappling with the ideas here. If like, you're not going to be confused if something is just like sort of a word jumble. Yeah. If your brain is actually trying to form a grip onto something, then you're going to get that weird sort of feeling of tension and pressure behind the eyeballs that is maybe unpleasant. But I really learned to like that feeling, because I could see the process of over and over again in these different cycles of feeling confused, feeling overwhelmed, coming up against this sort of giant of an idea, this colossal pain of like learning SQL from scratch or whatever, and just not getting it, and then slowly watching that dissolve and watching that shrink until 3 days later it's sort of trivial thing that I now know how to do, and I'm on to the next thing. So just due to the pace and the intensity of that process, it made me very sort of aware of my own metacognitive processes, and being able to sort of watch myself learn and know that I could learn. And it was just a matter of really holding my brain sponge against the giant, blob for 24 hours until it started to absorb it. And that would happen. And it would happen secretly, like while I was sleeping, and just to trust the process. So yeah, I would like anyone who feels stupid, that's a good thing. That means or confused, your brain is working if you're confused. Otherwise it would just be flatlining. You just be sort of staring with your mouth agape at it. So keep going and trust your brain. It's a cool thing we have.
Yeah, and especially when you after that confusion and you are trying to solve it, it's like something is not clear, and you try to clarify it and learn more and more, and then you can see that you solve a problem. You did something out of your knowledge. You can see the result, and this will give you more inspiration, right?
Yes. Yes, I think, and I think that's kind of why I like programming so much, because it's applied everything. It's a little bit applied philosophy sometimes, or when you get into the more heady functional programming aspects or design principles, and it's applied. Every piece of knowledge you have becomes a sort of a tool or a weapon or whatever in your tool belt that you get to then use, and get better at wielding. And it's great for that feedback loop. You get to run your ideas in a compiler or at least an interpreter back in the Ruby days and get immediate validation. So yeah, that's something else I would like. Definitely feedback loops, so important for learning. If you're just reading, also take those ideas and experiment with them. Like if you're trying to learn something I did all the time in that bootcamp was project based. So I was always typing code. So you form hypotheses. You're like, I think it works like this. So then type that out and then run it and see if you can validate or invalidate those hypotheses, and try to break it and see. It's really easy to forget, I think, just the beginning stages of programming where it's just a text file. Like if code doesn't feel like text to me anymore, it doesn't feel like a text file, but at the beginning it painfully felt like, what is this? Like an opening brace and a closing brace didn't feel like a block. It didn't feel like a new scope being introduced. It just felt like there are some braces here for some reason, and I can put them anywhere. I can type any character anywhere. So it's just like slowly you have to run it until your brain starts to impose an actual, almost physical structure on the code. I think that's something that it's really easy to forget. There's the curse of knowledge. Once you've learned this stuff, it's that you forget what it was like to not know it. And it's I think learning it late and so in such a tight amount of time, I tried to hold on to how painful it was and all those weird experiences of just all the ways that you can misunderstand things. There's so many ways. If you ever teach absolute newcomers, it's really fun because it's almost difficult to even speak in the terms that you know how to speak to like anyone else, because they don't know even the basic atoms of the vocabulary, and you have to break it down in these interesting ways.
Yeah. And teaching also help on learning in a different perspective. For example, if you teach a different level, you need to try to see it from their perspective to be able to explain it, and you will need to use their terms. Like you said, you need to look back from their perspective, how this could be clear for them.
Yeah, and it's a really fun challenge. It's kind of like a puzzle. You can treat it like a puzzle where your job is to figure out, sort of reconstruct their mental model in your head, and then teach to that. Like understand, it's all about empathy. You have to see things from their perspective, and then see what's missing, and then see how can I use the tools. It's almost like implementing a parametrically polymorphic function. Like given these type parameters, given these abstract ideas that they have, how can I build? Like you're sort of limited. How can I build to this new idea with their vocabulary and their current level of understanding? And then you could be wrong in so many ways. That's kind of the pain of it. You could misunderstand their mental model, and then you have to be ready to adapt, so you're not just pissing them off.
Yeah. And sometimes you get questions that you didn't think about because it is from a different perspective, and a detail that you just, because you understand it, you didn't think about that piece. It makes more aware.
Yeah, it's great. It's great for learning. Yeah, no, I mean, so it's so selfish as well, because you're hearing yourself explain it, and then you're like teaching it to yourself. It's like, oh yeah, that is a great way to explain it. Or now I understand it actually, now that I've put it into words for the first time. Oh yeah, I guess I do know what this is. Or now I've had the experience of in telling someone what something is, actually understanding it for the first time, so many times. Just thinking I know it. Maybe we can get back to that later when talking about functional programming and stuff, and sort of maybe the scary, the intimidation of that sort of domain, and the sort of gated community that it sometimes can appear to the outside. Because at least I felt like when I was learning Haskell, I thought I knew what a functor and a monad was and all these scary ideas or whatever, or more basic programmatic concepts when I was starting, but I didn't really. I just kind of I knew one usage of them. I didn't understand them deeply. And if you cling to just these ideas and these images and these words, you can really hurt yourself by not fully investigating it, by assuming that you know these things. You're gonna sort of preclude further understanding. And I think teaching is a great way to really not allow yourself much hubris, or to not hold any of your ideas precious, because if you just sort of take your current understanding and just repeatedly whap your student over the head with them, you're not going to have many students. Your students aren't going to grow.
Yeah.
You're going to just annoy people. In order to actually teach people, you have to break down your own understanding constantly, because it keeps sort of re-ossifying.
Yeah, it's a good perspective. And the next job was also using the same languages that you have learned from bootcamp.
So what happened was I worked for the boot camp, and as usual, I got a little bored. It was really fun teaching, but I tried to make a lot of sort of like interactive. I wanted to code apps too, so I made like these interactive quiz games so that the students could play these sort of semi-quiz. I made an app called Quizzard, which what was it like? I'm not really sure. There were two teams. They buzzed in and they got different questions. It was pretty basic, but I used that as an exploration for this language called Elixir. Mm-hmm. I slowly branched out from Ruby. Elixir is a language that runs on Erlang, but it was created by this guy named Jose Valim, who was a Rails contributor. So, programming languages are sort of strangely insulated, and I don't think I would have ever just jumped straight from Ruby to Scala. These are not, if they're in a graph, there are a few nodes between them. They're not just directly connected. But Elixir was connected to Ruby because it had the same creator. So I found out about it on the internet and through circles or whatever, through Slacks or Discords. I don't think those existed at the time, but through whatever I was talking with people in. And I learned that, and just I got very interested that involved immutability. That was my first sort of experience with immutability and pattern matching, even though it is totally not statically typed. It's very dynamic, and but yeah, it was very interesting, kind of as a built-in actor model. And I just really liked that, and then I kept wanting to learn other languages, and I learned Elm, which is kind of like a nerfed version of Haskell. It's kind of Haskell for the front end, and it's the same syntax, but way less concepts involved. It's much less powerful, but it was perfect for me, because I was just blown away how you could call a function without parentheses, because they have white space-based application. And I was like, okay, this breaks the laws of physics, of programming. You have to have parentheses and commas. Like, how can you just call a function with white space? It felt like a weird Jedi trick, which makes zero sense at all now. To me, it's like, oh yeah, it just needs to be parsable. As long as you can make it parsable, that's cool. But at the time, not fully understanding these things, it just felt magical and confusing. And I really liked that. And then I heard people complaining about Elm because it wasn't as powerful as Haskell. And I was like, oh, who are these jerks? Why do they not like Elm? And I want to be a jerk too. I want to know what a functor and a monad is finally. So that was all during the boot camp. I just became increasingly obsessed, and like, I probably procrastinated on my job. If I don't think that my boss will listen to this, but if he does, he probably knew that I was becoming increasingly procrastinatory and just mostly studying programming languages in my free time, and somewhat during work time. And so I got really into Haskell, and my boss did know this, and eventually they actually were bought out. So after a year and a half, they got bought out, and so I got let go because they were bought out and absorbed, and they didn't really need me anymore. But my boss was super nice, and he referred me to a friend of his in San Francisco for First Republic Bank, where he heard they were using Haskell, which is what I was wanting to study. So it was perfect. And so I went there, and that was my second job. And they really weren't using Haskell much. It turned out to be a lot. But I worked there for a year. I'll just fast forward the job stuff because I worked there for a year, and it was actually really terrible. I really hated it so much. It was Kafka. It was a Kafkaesque nightmare. There was so much bureaucracy. My team essentially delivered nothing of value to anyone. We just kept sort of pursuing the fever dreams of like executives. They'd come in and it's like, build an app from scratch. We're going to build an app. And then they'd go away for like 3 weeks and come back. I was like, where's my app? Never mind that. I had a new dream. Let's build this thing. So there was just no engineering culture or anything. It just kind of was a weird fluke. I don't know how it existed, just because of Silicon Valley, everything, engineering teams just kind of burst into existence randomly in places they don't belong. It was completely disconnected from any line of revenue. So I worked there for a year randomly, and then was like, okay, I'm going to try to look for a real Haskell job. And as I think might have happened to many people at the time, and maybe still does, I instead found a Scala job. And I didn't know what Scala was, but they told me it was similar enough to Haskell. And that was the first job where I finally got exposed to Scala. Yes, I will pause there.
And you learned Scala in within when you started the job, or once you got the offer, you started learning it by yourself, and then you continued in your job.
So yeah, I got the offer before learning Scala. The boss, the CTO, is cool with me knowing Haskell. He's a really cool guy, super smart, very much a super genius. He was only like 25 or 26, and yeah, something I'll never. He had his Google homepage was his like when you open up a new tab, it was his exact age with like with decimal points. So it was like 25.7777777888899, which is, maybe a little youth obsessed or something, but he was by all means a super genius, and liked Scala a lot. So I decided to trust him and learn it. But I really learned it on the job. I tried to learn it on the job. I read a little bit of the website, and I was like, oh yeah, it's like, I know Haskell, I could learn anything now. Haskell is the hardest language in the world to learn. So it was a little bit hubrisy. Haskell, as it tends to make people a little bit hubristic, and I certainly felt a little pompous at the time, like, oh, I know Haskell, I got everything. But then I got into the code base and felt a little, I never really I kind of procrastinated on the language. Because I was still a little bitter at not being able to find a Haskell job. And so I didn't fully understand the semantics. I didn't fully get the whole fusion between object-oriented and functional programming. The code base was not that great. It was written by lots of people who all wrote in different styles, which is something that I think people experience with Scala. Yeah. So there was a lot of crazy advanced type stuff because they had implemented their own programming language as well for a secret sub project that never really came to fruition. But as often is the case. I kind of slowly learned it, but kind of hated it. I was confused by implicits. I've complained about implicits before and probably shared this elsewhere, but I'd copy paste code from one file to another and it wouldn't compile anymore. And I was completely confused as to how that was possible. It's because, it didn't have the right implicit in scope, or it was used in some trait. There was the cake pattern as well was being used, which is, I still totally hate. It made the code completely unreadable. And there wasn't a lot of help, unfortunately. Everyone was pretty busy. So I just kind of did my tickets slowly and continued to read Haskell in my spare time and do Haskell stuff. And that continued until I decided to look at something called Zio, which I'd heard about previously on the internet from some, I think, tweet of John saying one monad to ruin them all. And I kind of dismissed that at the time. I was like, one monad to ruin them. What is this marketing speak? What is a one monad? No, you need many monads. You need monad transformer libraries. You need the ultimate composability. That's what I was very much a believer of. So I didn't pay it much mind at all until, I don't know, I don't even remember what first made me actually pay attention to it and actually give it a shot. It may have been the layer stuff, something around the layer stuff, because there was a particular style of coding I really liked to do in Haskell. There was a library called polysemi, which was this extensible effects library, which is all this fancy nonsense terminology. But it basically gave you a way of structuring programs, coding to interfaces, essentially, the things that, OOP people already knew about for a long time, but doing it nicely in a way in a functional programming language. And Z layers looked very similar, though they were implemented in a totally different way. They looked very similar. And when I mucked around with them, they gave me a similar sense of order and pleasure and reasonableness of being able to really just focus on one level of abstraction at a time and implement everything else in terms of another interface. But then also being able to build the whole app nicely at the end and fit it all together as you slowly sort of provided implementations for those layers. And yeah, so that's kind of got me into Zio, and that's sort of what led me finally to actually enjoying Scala. I really didn't enjoy Scala before I tried Zio. Its API in particular was just like, oh, this is feels different than the rest of that chaos world out there. It's regular. They've thought about the names of the methods. They thought about the names of the classes. I could command click into these things, and it's not just sort of a giant car crash of implicits and f-bounded things that to me always looked like an eyesore. I have no problem with that idea coming from Haskell. I like type classes and all that, but just the aesthetics of it in Scala was just made it a non-starter for me. It just was too much typing. And so yeah, experiencing Zio for the first time, I was like, oh, you know what? This actually seems kind of cool. And I started to actually study Scala. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna leave this job and I'm gonna find a new job.
At that time, you were already in the job of Scala,
Yes.
where the code, the implicits, magic, etc. And then you got the chance to see that there is a better way to use Scala, but in a very nice way, similar to Haskell.
Exactly. Yeah. This is at my first Scala job. About 9 months in, I finally find out about Zio and decide to actually give Scala a chance and start reading all I can about it. And okay, let me actually understand implicits for real, and reading the docs and doing the same sorts of things I was talking about earlier, experimenting, opening files and seeing how to break it. And this is how implicit resolution works, and trying to actually understand the details, which is it feels good to actually know a tool inside and out. And I was for a long time just kind of procrastinating on that with Scala because I wasn't fully sold on it. But once it was very pleasurable to actually understand the language deeply and not just kind of throw things around and be angry when it didn't work. So yeah, I decided to leave because I moved at that point from San Francisco to Portland. And right after moving, I realized they weren't actually cool with me moving, and they made me a contractor. So I was angry at them and was going to find a new job where I could be full-time for all the, nice usual benefits and things. And so yeah, at around that time, I got really into Zio and joined John's mentorship program shortly after that, because I was looking for I really wanted to understand the Scala language. And there weren't too many videos online for doing the kind of type level, like the things I was interested in. But I looked at John's sort of Patreon posts, and some of the earlier ones were like type level programming, designing a type level SQL library, and all these sorts of things that were really advanced. And while there were advanced type level libraries in Scala, there wasn't the same sort of payload of just videos on this stuff that there was in the Haskell world. Like all that Haskell has is just type astronaut talks. There wasn't much in Scala, and I wanted to really understand like what is the thought process behind designing a library like Zio, and what are the tools involved. And I really like the design here. This really speaks to me. So yeah, I just wanted to let me go straight to the source here on that.
I am curious about like your journey into contributing, and also I think every week you are doing also the session with Adam. Can you share with us how it went until today?
Yeah. I'm not the greatest storyteller, so let me be maybe too verbose or give all the details because I don't know which ones are important. But I'll try to make it semi-entertaining. So yes, I had to leave that job because they made me a contractor. So I found another job. It was based in New York City, but remote because I didn't want to move because we just moved to Portland. So I got this job, and it was Scala. Had nothing to do with Zio, but now with this in my pocket, I did my coding take-home project in Zio, made a little tiny URL type clone in with Zio, a little URL shortening app, and enjoyed that. And so I went there, and I was like, I think during the interview process, they're like, you're not going to tell us that we all have to use, Zio, right? You're not going to you're going to be okay to work in these other older style. They knew their code base was creaky, and they're like, you're okay with this, right? I was like, yeah, I could totally survive with that. I only survived like 2 weeks. And then I was like, guys, you guys really have to try this other stuff. Maybe I could show you. It was not a smart move. But it was really painful to work on a large legacy app. And then 3 months into this, COVID happened and I got laid off. Maybe because I was a little too forward thinking with the Zio stuff. But they also were nice, and they said, they lost some big contracts. They gave me severance and said, you're unemployed now. Congratulations. And then I was unemployed for like 5 months. It was a terrible time. And as we all know, the beginning of COVID was a bad time. But I had a lot of time in my hands, so I kept doing the Patreon thing with John, which was a pretty big investment too. So it was probably a foolish decision as well, but it was the best decision I made during that period. And I kind of assumed that would be the case, just to keep investing in sort of learning and knowledge and expertise, waiting for hiring managers to become less afraid of the apocalypse, and hoping that the apocalypse did not, see itself through, because there was a lot of unknowns that the early COVID days. But eventually, I got another job, and I still didn't at this point contribute at all to nothing. I didn't contribute anything to Zio. I was just studying, and I was making I think at this point I did make a little Zio visualizer for the web. So there's this little website called Zio. What is it called? Zio Catechism or something like this. I'll send you a link.
Okay, interesting.
Zio Catechism. Yeah, it had all these. Maybe it's zio.surge.sh. Let me see if that's correct. Oh yeah, is that right? Yes. Okay. Zio.surge.sh. I'll send this to you. But I was learning Scala JS at the time, and so I made a little Zio visualizer. So there's all these like clickable, interactive, animated code examples for different Zio effects. And so I was writing like an animation library. So I wanted to use that to animate the Zio effects and visualize them. To try to sell future jobs on Zio.
It looks cool.
Yes, I tried to reuse my limited aesthetic training from the few failed attempts at art school here and there. But yeah, I worked at this company until I finally this new company that I joined was great. It was the best job I'd had up to that point. I was able to use Scala. They actually wanted me to teach people functional Scala, and so I was able to say, now we're using Zio, people. And so I introduced Zio slowly. Taught some folks. It was really satisfying. Started a weekly sort of Scala group there, which is what got me into doing weekly Scala group things, and that went really, really well. And the only problem with Zio introducing that was with Z layers. So everyone seemed to enjoy it on my team. One coworker really, really enjoyed it with me a lot, except he would repeatedly call me in to help him debug the Z layer errors, which you might be familiar with me. So you were telling me about your experience that you had maybe this very morning, which you're building some layers, and layers are this really cool encoding of basically a node in your dependency graph, how to build some piece of your project, or maybe multiple pieces, multiple services your application depends on, given their output and their input. So you can give me a user service if you give me a database and a logging service or what have you. And these are encoded at the type level, which is really cool, because if the types compile, if it compiles, your whole application is going to be built. But if it doesn't compile, you're going to get like a 500-line sort of gobbledygook output, because the compiler doesn't do type diffing very nicely, and it just says like this type was not equal to this other type, and the difference might be very small. It could just be one service, you added one dependency in one piece of your graph, but it's going to propagate and blow up into this huge nonsense. And I've seen my coworker in particular was like copy pasting these error messages and lining them up to make them even, and then like trying to spot the difference, which is like a horrible experience. So I was thinking, okay, I love Z layers so much, but this experience is leaving something to be desired. So my first thought was actually, maybe I'll make a tool where you can copy paste the code strings into something and it'll automatically tell you exactly what's missing. So really sort of, not venturing into any scary world of macros just yet, just like maybe I can just make a really low tech tool where you copy the code strings and it'll give you a nice diff. But then I decided to actually try to do something else, and realized technically I think this might be possible with macros, because all the type information is there. That's the kind of the beauty of the Z layer thing. It's all in the type signatures through these giant intersection types, everything that is needed. So I very slowly kind of backed my way into exploring that, because I didn't want to learn Scala 2 macros. They were one of the things that traumatized me from that first Scala job. There were macros in the code base, and I looked at the code and it was just if you've ever never looked at macro code before, maybe you have, it's like all of the rules of Scala seem to break down. It's horrifying. It's really ugly code generally too, because it tends to be doing complicated things. And if you don't really know how they even work, it's very complicated. So I slowly decided, though, I was motivated enough by this problem, a real world problem, which I knew could not only help my teammates and help the adoption of Zio, my current goal at my team, but just like everybody. I was pretty confident this would be a cool experience. This is better than a crazy type error. And I love Z layers so much. I was tired of them getting a bad rap from people who ran into, understandably, the issues with them. You kind of had to fully understand them and to use them. So yeah, that was my first open source contribution, which was, I think, like a year ago. So I started doing that, and I think it was like January of 2021 that I sort of worked on that, and over the course of a week or two, and it started out simply, but I got it to work pretty easily.
It was Zio Magic.
Zio Magic was the name of that, yes. I gave it a pretty bad name, called it Zio Magic, just because I was so happy about it. It felt like magic. They probably heard adoption. Some people were like, I cannot introduce magic at my company. We're a very serious company. So luckily now, that was just the beginning of the journey. And I very shortly after that, saw that Ziverge was hiring. And at that point, it was kind of a done deal. Yes. Technically, my job at the time, also, there was a misunderstanding, and the company lawyer kind of brought me into a meeting and got angry about me, or sort of, he didn't mean to dress me down or yell at me about open source. I think he was just trying to get his own ducks in a row, but there was a misunderstanding, and I thought he was telling me that the company owns Zio Magic. That company owns Zio Magic, and I was the most furious I've ever been in my life. Like my lip was quivering, I noticed during this meeting. I was like, that's never happened. My lip has never quivered. I didn't know, like, I see that in movies, like when you get angry, your lip quiver, but like my whole face was kind of quavering. And I was like, it took all my effort not to quit immediately. But I did that day reach out to John and Sandra and said, I see you're hiring. Might I apply for this? And they said, of course, and set me up with our contractor, Capital One. So I interviewed with them, and yeah, that was kind of the beginning of this journey of like fully involved and in open source and getting to work with these really smart people professionally, and yeah, just feeling super aligned. That it took a long time. It took like 5 years, as I mentioned, before I finally found like a job that felt like, oh yeah, this is it. This is everything I wanted, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that sounds very cool. Yeah. And are you thinking about writing a book?
Oh, did I? Oh no, where did you hear that?
I just thought about this now.
Good. I just asked that because I think at some point last year, I'm like, I'm going to write a book about Scala.js. Everyone, I made a like a landing page. I still, what is it? book.scala.lol is my landing page. And I have like an announcements page and everything. And I put all this effort into like building a weird book website, but then I only wrote one article, which wasn't even about the topic at hand. It was about functional programming. So while I like the idea and I do enjoy writing a book seems like it's a very hard and long process, a very difficult and long process. And and it's not, I don't think it has quite the dynamic of catharsis and immediate feedback that I excel at. Like that's kind of, I think, why I'm good at these sort of improvisational, sort of short-term video-based, interaction-based approach, is because there's some immediate catharsis there. I feel satisfied. It is content. It is a burst of creation. It doesn't take a year of patient monastic effort, which is, I admire that so much. I would love to say I wrote a book. I would love to be a writer. That sounds very noble and intellectual, but I'm not sure if it's in the cards just yet. I think about it every now and again, but I think I like teaching, and I'm going to keep doing workshops, and maybe I want to record some more videos. Those are a little satisfying. I think those might be better. I think that might be better for my personality anyway, just to do it like
interactive.
that. But one day, a little more interactive and a little more yeah, loud. I can be louder in person than I can be in a book. It would be in all caps, my book. It would not be good. But yeah, one day I will write a book. One day, but probably not in 2022.
And about your first talk in a tech conference about Scala GS, was that the first talk, or was it me the first time I watched your first talk?
I think it was this one. It was so my first talk that I did a talk at, not in person, but the first remote talk or first talk in any form was Functional Scala 2020. So that was a JavaScript talk. Yeah. Which was on it was called Stockholm Syndrome Escape Velocity, a mouthful there. And for that one, I made sort of an interactive slideshow application where it was very silly. I got carried away. Usually, yeah, that's how it works. I build my book website application before writing the book. I built my interactive slideshow app before having any slides. Luckily, I actually wrote content for that one. And that was really fun. But that was the first talk I gave. That was very time consuming and intense. But that was really fun.
Yeah, it was very fun. When we watched the talk, it's something that gives bring attention, and you cannot get distracted, or like you want to see what's next. And also the talk about like this year in functional Scala about the Z layers and the example. It was fun. You have you are creative, and I really like how you do this.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's. I don't know what it is. It's my own pathology, but I'm bad at just doing the thing that people ask, the straightforward thing. I have to complicate things in certain ways. I don't know why. Maybe it's a need to be liked or to entertain or something. I was kind of a bit of a class clown character. So yeah, it's satisfying to make people laugh and to make things weird and wacky when I can, especially in the world of functional programming, which tends to be a little more serious or academic or straight-faced. So, but yeah, it's how I motivate myself to do things. It's hard to just write the thing. It's like, let me make this interesting for myself by adding some craziness to it.
It's like, I don't know how to say it, but it's like you put some of your personality, like you like that. And as I said earlier about your energy, like you feel, it feels that it is you, it's your energy, and you are showing.
Well, yeah, if I could, take that and to try to give some advice in general, it's just for what worked for me, which is just that I think for a long time I knew I was bad at emulating other people, even though I tried maybe in the past to do that a little bit, and without much success. And it's kind of the boring thing. Maybe it's trite advice at this point, but just to be yourself really would be the summation of it. But you're going to be the best. No one's, oh man, it's all just going to be platitudes and postcards, but no one's going to be able to be you as well as you are, right? You've got it all going for you. You're exactly who you are. So be the most you can be.
Exactly.
And figure out, what you're good at. I think, I don't know, figure out what you're good at. Do whatever you want to do that makes you happy, I think. But luckily in this situation, people seem to enjoy the talk. I mean, there are lots of things I like doing. I like playing music a lot. I like drawing. I like drawing a lot in the past. I'm not a famous musician by any means, not a famous artist. I never really had much work in illustration. I think I'm okay at doodling, but for whatever reason, people seem to connect with with talks that I've given, and that's cool. It feels like, oh yeah, this is a good alignment of what I naturally like to do, and it seems to connect with people, and that doesn't always happen. So I feel lucky that I can have a career option doing something that isn't torture, which is cool. I didn't think that was going to be in the cards.
Yeah, and when we receive the information, visualize the information in that way, in an interesting way, it brings it gets our attention. Also, it has this impact. The way you present.
I think maybe that comes from the improv stuff and just the need to be big and entertaining, and afraid that people will tune out if I'm not sort of constantly exploding in a certain way, like a long car crash, but an educational car crash. Yeah, I mean, and another sort of to turn it into something that's useful to anyone else might be that I try to communicate. I try to give talks on things that I'm excited about. Like, as I mentioned, I'm really bad at doing anything that I'm not excited about. So sort of the dual of that is that I'm good at doing things that, or whatever. I only do things that I'm excited about. And I think wanting to share that.
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah, it's good to, I see some talks sometimes where I feel like that person maybe just did it because they thought they had to, or it was like a homework assignment.
Yeah.
Ideally, you're giving the talk and you're devoting this time because you care about it. And if you do care about it, what is it that excites you about it so much that you just want to tell other people and get them excited, so you can all be like, whoa, free structures are awesome. We're all this is so cool. and just feeling that's a cool communal feeling, and there's not many opportunities in programming. It's kind of an isolated activity, so it's a really cool way to nerd out ecstatically with other people.
Yeah, as you said about doing things when you like to do, and it is like not only
no, it's true. It's like I'm a child.
I
yeah.
mean, do the things that you like to do, and it's like you are passionate about, and you don't have to force just to do this because you have to do it. Like, okay, let's say you are working on something that you're really passionate about, and this is very nice. You are going to be happy in your life.
Yeah.
You don't have to every day wake up and think that I have to do this. And if you have in your personality that you want to do what you like, you are putting like your passion into it, and this is very nice.
Yeah, I feel very lucky because otherwise it would be not probably so enjoyable. I mean, maybe I'd find something else. Who knows what the other paths are? But I feel pretty lucky that not only does this career exist, that it's relatively remunerative, and it's a fairly decent job to have, and it allows for intellectual stimulation and meeting cool people who are smart and friendly across the whole world. So yeah, it's a good gig. I agree.
Yeah. I'm also grateful about this, and I wish that people will get motivated to go into this field, and we see more people are like joining the tech community in general, and work on this.
It can't just all be the college pathed people. Yes, I hope if we're not obvious, I did not ever successfully graduate from higher education. I was a pretty miserable student in general. I mean, if you took a snapshot of my life at 24, that it wasn't looking like it was going in a really positive direction, career-wise at least. And I was just bumming around playing bad music. So luckily programming existed. If anyone has any interest in this at all and finds it intellectually stimulating, you definitely don't need a degree, just to say it. Obviously, I'm assuming there are maybe some difference. I've heard maybe at least in the States, I don't think you need a degree, especially if you can't afford one. I can only really speak to the States. Perhaps in the global, I've heard things about like visas. If you're trying to come to America, perhaps they like seeing a degree. That sucks, because yes, in general, America likes their degrees. But luckily, there's a cheat code where you can just Google stuff. And there's so much stuff now, even more than when I started. And I really wish it existed when I was in high school. I wish I kind of started younger to think that I could do this and think there was a path without academia. I just remember being in middle school and feeling really lonely and just hating everything about the school environment, and just begging my parents, like, please let me be homeschooled. Let me just go on the internet. But I really didn't have a compelling case at that time. Maybe if coding was a little more popularized and there were people showing that thing was possible, I would have, I don't know, dropped out as a middle schooler. Maybe that's not an inspirational message, but if anyone at their current age and all you middle schoolers out there, quit and live in a bungalow with all you need is a Kindle e-reader and a connection to, I think that gives you free internet, right? Anyway, yeah, it's totally silly possible to, but there are lots of gatekeepers out there,
Yeah. Was there an advice that you wished you have known, or you would give to your younger self if you go back to the past?
It's funny you ask that, Liam. It's funny you ask that. I'm taken aback by that inappropriate question. Very prodding. I have a personal life. I have my past is my business. How dare you? I'm disconnected. Yes. What? I'm so sorry. What would I say to my younger self? Goodness. Yes, many things at many times. I mean, yeah, no. Let me get slightly. I mean, I've been slightly personal already, but yeah, I felt like I felt very strange as a kid and like an outsider. I'm sure that's not too uncommon with lots of people. I was really lonely in high school. I had a couple of friends, but mostly felt pretty invisible and pretty just bummed out and just not wanting to be there. It was very torturous, that whole experience. And I kind of wish I knew that the world wasn't this cruel. It didn't have to be, the weird conveyor belt they were putting you on, where middle school is preparation for high school and you got to do well now. I wish I just knew. I wish I could go back and whisper in my ear, like when in 7th grade or something, or 6th grade, when things started to get pretty just miserable, and just say, you don't have to give a shit about this at all. It's going to be okay. And like, there was a lot of guilt that I put on myself to perform academically, because I did really well in elementary school, let me tell you. No, and a little bit in middle school and stuff. And just family-wise, my grandparents were professors, and so coming home, they were like, "What are your grades? And you got to do well. And you're smart. Why aren't you doing better academically?" And so on and so forth. I just wish I could go back and say, "Dude, you're going to be okay. Just enjoy life. Read a book. Relax." Luckily, there is a new paradigm of computer programming that you can use your weird little brain to understand fascinating little puzzles and build things. And it'll be satisfying. It'll be like playing with Legos, and you'll be able to, have health insurance and live in an apartment and eat food. And it's going to be okay. So I'd probably go back and tell myself that. I'm not sure if that's generally applicable, but it would have, yeah, that was a question, and that's my answer.
Wow, it hit me because I would wish also to do that, the same. I worried a lot in the past, and I wished if I didn't, if I knew that everything will be all right.
Yeah. The way they raise kids in this world, there's a lot of pressure. And in certain, I don't know if I can't speak globally, but in certain cases, it's there's a particular path you have to take, and if you don't take that, it's very scary. And there's all this anxiety from a young age potentially. But for whatever reason, whether or not it's fair or good or whatever, it is what it is. The world's complicated. I cannot explain it. Life is mysterious, consciousness, all this stuff, whatever, etc. Take a toke of the bong. But luckily, programming is a career that you may have, and if you enjoy it, it will sustain you for a time. It looks like it's somewhat future-proof. So go for it, and it'll subsidize what you're passionate about, and whatever passions you might have additionally in addition to programming. Hopefully, you enjoy programming. A little bit, but to be honest, like sometimes it's not my number one passion. My number one passion is playing music. It's just that no one's going to give me money to live playing music currently, probably ever. So programming, though, I enjoy so much about it, and it's satisfying, and so there you go. Thank you, William. This was really, really nice. I'd like talking with you, talking at you for so long, but also it's good to have. No, they can't see your face, your smiling, happy face, which has been very supportive during this process.
Oh, thanks a lot. It was amazing to talk to you, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, William. Till next time. Ta-ta.
I'm looking forward to our next episode with a new guest and new inspiring story. Until then, stay safe and stay tuned to our next episode. Tic Tac, tackle the inspiration.